right, so I have the distinct pleasure of introducing our ninth speaker for today. Adriel Nisperos is a passionate and mission-driven communications professional. During the day, he supports STEM students, impact entrepreneurs, and tech hubs at PhilDev Foundation by telling compelling stories of impact through writing, design, and photography. Gaining a background in development communication, Adriel uses communication to advocate for quality education, social innovation, and sustainability in and outside the work that he does. His hustle for development continues after work hours, volunteering as a member advocate at the 2030 Youth Force in the Philippines and as a mover of the Movers program. Without further ado, I turn it over to Adriel to go over his speaker session.
Hi everyone. Good evening on your side, and thanks for having me here. Let me try to share my screen first. All right. Yeah. Yeah. Right. So again, good evening, everyone. Today I'm going to be sharing with you about how to tell stories for your social enterprise, or at least for your innovation, as you are building your innovations throughout this researchathon. But before I start sharing you how to tell stories, I'd like to introduce myself just one more time. um, so again, I'm Adriel. I'm a development communicator. I'm a graduate of Bachelor of Science in Development Communication from the University of the Philippines in Los Baños. I'm a storyteller. I write blogs, not only just because it's part of my work at PhilDev Foundation, but I also contribute to online publications on Medium and on newspapers as well, if I have time. I'm also a development worker. I've been working in the development sector in the last 2 years. And yet, Still Dev Foundation is a nonprofit that supports impact entrepreneurs, STEM scholars in the Philippines. And lastly, I'm an SDG advocate. So, as mentioned earlier by Mohammed, um, I volunteer at the 2030 Youth Force in the Philippines, and I'm also a mover at the Movers program. So these are programs that are geared to reach and empower young individuals all over Asia Pacific to help them or empower them to contribute to the Sustainable Development Goals. So now that I've introduced myself, I'd like to go over first what we're covering for today's session. So um, at the end of this session, we hope to be able to define what storytelling is, explain how storytelling can benefit your social enterprise or the innovation that you're building. We're able to determine how you can tell your business story or your innovation story and identify platforms where you can distribute your stories. So, to get things started, let me ask you, what does storytelling mean to you? So you can either type your answers in the chat, or you can feel free to share it. I know some of our participants are also watching this through the recorded version. So feel free to reflect to yourself what does storytelling mean to you, right? So we make sense of the world through the stories that we consume and create every day. We understand how things work through stories. Like we teach various stuffs like sustainability, entrepreneurship, technology, all of those through stories. Because it's basically all around us, and it's stories are on your favorite Netflix TV show, the podcast you listen to when you're washing the dishes, and the influencers you follow on Instagram, on TikTok. So that's how omnipresent stories are. And according to Steve Jobs, stories are actually the most powerful person in the world is the storyteller, because the storyteller sets the vision, the values, the agenda of an entire generation that is to come. So that's how powerful stories are for Steve. And true enough, stories shape how we see the world and the issues surrounding it, like climate change, poverty, gender inequality, among many others. So just zooming in further to climate change. So how do scientists or even advocates of climate action use stories? Um, as you all know, there are a lot of people who don't believe that climate change is happening nowadays. So aside from telling the facts or research results from scientists, advocates are using also stories to highlight the impact of climate change to areas that are affected the most, such as the Philippines. We're in the um, near the Pacific Ocean, and so we are hit almost by 20 typhoons or per year. Some of them are getting stronger every year, so that's just one impact, and a lot of our cities here and communities get inundated by flood. And there are so these are stories that um, also magnify the impact of climate change. So these are also used by advocates to share these realities. So this is also why storytelling is an important aspect to look into, especially when developing innovations and social enterprises. So, but why do we need storytelling? Why is it really important to talk about? So, humans are hardwired to interpret experiences as stories. So, these are just a couple of things that help you or help us as humans. First, it helps us connect our message to the hearts and minds of our audience. So stories help us relate with our audience. It's one of the ways we connect with our friends. Actually, that's just one thing that helps us make friends, right? So the first thing you meet someone, you ask them like, how is his or her or their day, and then the stories keep coming in, and then you find something to connect to based on your experience. So that's one way to how storytelling helps you. Continuing on that exchange, you are able to build relationships and trust with your audience or with someone you're talking to. So as you continue telling stories, you eventually gain trust um, throughout the interaction, and sooner or later you'll be having this relationship between your audience and yourself. So either you're um, someone they can approach to or for mentorship, for example. Another thing is that stories enable you to spark new thinking or ideas. So, because it highlights the nuances of each individual experience, we get to understand the differences in their experiences that we may not be able to see before. So, this is especially helpful when developing innovations. So, um, how are you able to spark new thinking and ideas when you're developing innovations? You directly talk to your audience or your users, potential users. So I know this is a researchathon, and maybe some of you are developing um, not necessarily innovations, but discovering things that we are not able to see before or understand before. But one of the things that you can capitalize on is like really talking to your target audience, because each individual experience problems in a different way. So it yeah, by telling their stories or understanding their stories, you're able to um, get an insight about each individual experiences, and check maybe their experience is not unique at all. Maybe it's also experienced by many of your target users. And lastly, storytelling enables you to communicate and reinforce your value. So, for example, you had an exam in one of your subjects. I know some of you are still undergraduate students and high school students. So, for example, you had one exam in one of your subjects. So you prepared so hard for it, like studying days and nights, just to ensure that you get every question right. And then on your exam day, you can hardly answer anything. I know the feeling. I've been a student. So There are times that we really put our hearts into it when we study, but then on the exam day, it's just unbelievable that you're unable to answer anything. So you found your exam challenging, and then when the results came out, you found out that you were unable to get the grade that you were hoping for. So when you tell that story to your friend or to your family, I guess, which part of those stories do you tell first? Do you tell about how you prepared for it? Do you tell first how difficult it was when you were answering? Do you highlight some questions that you thought you can answer, but because of, I don't know, mental block, you weren't able to? Or do you emphasize um, the fact that you weren't able to get the score that you want? Or what you're gonna do after that? What are you planning to do to ensure that you don't get that score again? So whichever part of that story you highlight reinforces the values, whether you value the journey, the process of preparation, or um, the next steps after experiencing failure. So these are the things that we may not be able to notice on a daily basis, but storytelling reinforces actually what we believe in, or what we how do we see our lives, or exactly how we experience stuff. So that kind of also works for innovations and social enterprises. So storytelling helps your social enterprise or innovations. Just like how stories can help us personally, storytelling can also help your social enterprise or innovation in a number of ways, whether you're pitching to a potential investor or a partner, or reporting the impact of your innovation. So first, storytelling can help you connect and build relationships with your customers and beneficiaries. So, as we learned moments ago, stories connect us. And this is even scaled by digital technology. So, we can get connected with people almost anywhere. So, just like this researchathon, we have participants all over the world, actually. So, once you connect with your customers and beneficiaries, they start to relate with your business as customers support businesses they share their values with. Second, stories are powerful tools to communicate the change that we want to see in the world. So you can use storytelling to create dissatisfaction with the present, and then share the mistakes in your business, or maybe establish the case for change, and then create that vision towards the future state. So, for example, um, yeah, most businesses before package their products using single-use plastics. So, through stories about how these plastics negatively affect our oceans and marine life, and maybe even those living through fishing, um, you can tell those stories and highlight how they're negatively affected, like reduced number of fish that affects the livelihood of fisher folks, or those um, actually just using um, I mean living near the oceans that um, get affected by, what do you call this, surge, or even um, uh, fish kills. So these are experiences that you can also highlight through the stories to help you magnify that dissatisfaction with the present, and then shed new light to what can we do, or um, what the future may be, if we're able to answer this through our innovations. So these stories, after telling these stories, businesses started to change their packaging by using more sustainable materials. So some of them are already ditching actually the packaging. So their customers can just um, free to go to their shop or to their stores, and then bring they have this bring your own um, bag uh, approach to it. So these are just some of the solutions that arose after um, these stories highlight these negative impacts on the lives of people. And lastly, stories enable you to communicate your impact in a way numbers cannot. So Statistics may be, yeah, effective in showing a macro perspective about issues, but stories enable your customers to understand your costs, values, and impact on on a deeper level. And as mentioned, customers relate more with stories. So um, it's known, like, observation that we tend to listen more to stories than when we share statistics, because we can easily relate to with stories. We can see ourselves in it, unlike in numbers where um, it's more of a macro perspective, and it's kind of difficult to see yourself in it because you're just a number. But through stories, you're able to highlight the nuances and the experience, and you can put yourself really in that situation of the story. So who can tell the story? So your business story can be told by either you as the founder or the developer of your innovation, and your customers or beneficiaries. So when you are the storyteller, it's important that you have a clear core message. So you can set your objectives right beforehand, and that's really crucial in developing your core message. So, like I said, whether you're pitching to your innovation in a competition or raising funds from investors, or having a story is really crucial. So I'd like to borrow some of the concepts that I've learned from Professor Mikey Signer of the University of British Columbia. She's one of our visiting professors from in a project that we're co-implementing. We met her when she was deployed here in the Philippines to help our partner universities in their innovations. So being exposed to a lot of social enterprises, Professor Signer found that stories are most effective when they are anchored to three things. It's actually three P's: person, place, and a parallel experience. So, first, let's talk about the person. So, your story can revolve around a personal experience or a story of someone that triggered you to create your innovation. So, um, so, for example, you met someone who experiencing difficulties in accessing healthcare facilities. So, what are his or her or their pain points? Why is that happening? So you can revolve your story around that person, so your target audience can also go along with you in their journey. So um, you can highlight why that person is unable to access healthcare facilities, or are there healthcare facilities to begin with, and how is that how did that impact the life of that person. So these are heartfelt, actually emotional stories that you can um, use to portray the need for your innovation or the solution that you're trying to provide. Another anchor that we can discuss is place, which highlights a certain place where something significant happened. So it can also be a place where you saw the struggle the most. For example, you used to come, going back to that example earlier about oceans and beaches. So, for example, you used to come to a beach to enjoy the summer. Then suddenly your favorite beach changed. There's so much plastic waste now that it didn't give you the same relaxing feeling anymore. So that can be the anchor as to why you built your innovation promoting sustainable use of packaging materials. So that's how you highlight the place as an anchor of your story. And then lastly, the last P is called parallel. In this anchor, comparison and contrast is key. So identify differences in experience, like how a certain community needs healthcare facilities, while in other communities they have more than enough. So you can use this contrast to encourage your audience to support your innovation. So I remember, I remember pitch from a video that I watched just recently. Sorry. So in that video, the girl is um, promoting the use of what do you call this? It's like a small science kit for laboratories. So She contrasted that in their community, there's hardly anything for their schools. So students get to learn chemistry through books, which is kind of weird because it's chemistry is a lot about experiments. So you can see exactly how chemical change works, but she contrasted it with, for example, in schools in the United States, where schools have enough materials, but they weren't using it. They're just stored somewhere. So it's like um, uh, 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 they are able to use it like more efficiently. So she's pitching to the investors or the audience that there's a need to create lab kits for their communities so that they can learn chemistry better and improve their learning outcomes in science. So that kind of contrast creates like an idea of yeah, why aren't we supporting these kinds of initiatives? And it's needed by our communities. So these are just three keys that you can use to hook your audience into your story. So here are other ways actually that you can tell your story as a founder. So you can highlight the origin and vision of your innovation. The big idea, as I'd like to call it, or the highlight is your innovation itself, and the focus on social impact. So for this one, origin and vision, you try to tell your audience the inspiration behind your innovation or social enterprise that you're building, and then try to highlight also how you see it contributing to social change. So some of the things you may want to ask yourself is, um, how did came about with this? How did I come about with this innovation? What problem am I solving through this innovation? So you can highlight that origin or that pain point, and then connect it to how you want it. How do you want to see the change happening in the future? So an example of this is a story from Youth Collab. So the startup is called AI for Gov. It's a tech startup that develops artificial intelligence and machine learning powered solutions to enable citizen engagement and empower local governments. So in this example, this story tells how AI for Gov started from the founder's experience working in the government and seeing the issues firsthand when it comes to engaging their constituents. So she found out that citizens are able to, seek the answers they get the answers they're looking for when they're inquiring for government services. Some of them are also unable to access the accurate and relevant information they need to be able to, for example, register um, for the elections or getting updated with vouchers in schools to access discounts in education institutions. So seeing this fueled them to build their start. So in this story, they also highlight the change that they want to have, which is to have a more engaged constituency in participatory governance. So you can also check in terms of your innovation, that the innovation that you're building, how is it solving a certain problem? So you can connect that, create your story. Next one is the big idea, which focuses on the innovation itself or the uniqueness and the novelty of your innovation. So try to ask yourself, how does my innovation work? And what is so innovative about my product? So this example, um, I highlighted how some Filipino students invented gloves that are able to understand Filipino sign languages and turn it into speech. So it's actually a video, but I'm not sure if I can still play it given the time. But um, this video highlights like um, that how their technology is really able to translate the Filipino sign language into speech. So it's not really technical, but it provides the like laymanized version or the popular version of how the technology works, and that helps your audience understand your innovation or your technology. Then lastly, focus on impact. Since in this researchathon, I found out that you have topics on technology, healthcare, environment, and addressing systemic issues. So there's a need to really highlight the impact part. So as you are building your innovation or social enterprise, tell the story of how your innovation or business will address societal challenges and improve people's lives. So ask yourself, who will benefit from my innovation or product? How does my product support communities and beneficiaries? So in this example, this is one of the stories that I wrote as part of my as part of the project that we're implementing in the Philippines. So it's called Impact First: Social Enterprises in the Philippines Innovate to Respond to the Coronavirus Pandemic. So as you know, when the pandemic broke in 2020, everyone was just confused what's happening, and we can hardly navigate the things because it's just spreading too fast, and then everything's shut down in the Philippines. We the government implemented a an enhanced community quarantine where everyone was just strictly inside their homes, and then stores or businesses shut down temporarily. And but at the end of the day, we have needs to fulfill. So there's difficulty in accessing these products. So in this story, I try to emphasize the gaps that needs to be fixed, especially how large scale the impact of the pandemic is. And then I try to explain how each social enterprise can address those issues while slowly helping the country's economy build back better. So social enterprises, as you know, are also businesses. So they're actually hitting two birds with one stone. So, for example, the one in the red in this photo, his name is Robbie. He has a social enterprise called Uproot Urban Farms, and in his social enterprise, he tries to train communities on how to build grow hubs or urban farms to enable them to grow their own food, and at the same time grow enough food just to sell them to potential customers. So to address the coronavirus pandemic, he developed we call these baskets as bayongs. So in the Philippines, we call baskets as bayongs. So he developed packages of bayongs to deliver to communities that are mostly affected by the pandemic. So some of them don't have been relieved of their jobs, so they aren't able to provide for their families. So through the communities that he trained on urban farming, they're able to create packages or bayongs to donate to communities affected by the pandemic. And then here on the leftmost side, where um, people are riding cars. So these, although you can actually see it, but they develop our ride-hailing app for persons with disabilities. So, as you know, during the pandemic, the persons with the disabilities need to continuously seek medical care, and so because public transport is unable to do that, they the social enterprise called Accessi Wheels, they get volunteers from all over their community to help them drive vehicles for persons with disabilities so that they can continue getting to hospitals and receiving their medical care continuously. So despite the pandemic, so those are just some of the things that they're able to develop solutions for, especially knowing how the problems of their customers or beneficiaries are continuously happening despite the pandemic. So you can highlight this impact um, when you're developing your story. the story of your innovation or your social enterprise. So now that we've actually discussed how you or the founder can tell your innovation or social enterprise story, you can also have your customers or beneficiaries be the storyteller. So you can also use these um, to communicate your innovation to your potential partners or investors. So it can be as compelling. So borrowing again from Professor Signer's observations, she was able to identify three common elements that make beneficiary stories effective. So it's struggle, hope, and learning. So these elements help your beneficiary stories become more compelling and effective. First, struggle highlights the challenges experienced by your customer. So right before your innovation came in to intervene, you highlight the challenges and their pain points, and then ask them to describe what their life was like before. And then when your innovation came in, did your innovation give your customer some hope? How did they feel about it when they find out about your innovation? So highlight that part of the story or experience because that shows potential for impact at a large scale. And then lastly, it's about learning. So after your customer purchased your product, what did he or she or they find out? After all, in social entrepreneurship, it's not just the product, but the cause or the advocacy behind it. So did a certain behavior change from plastic to recyclables, from manual to automated experiences? So something like that. So you can highlight these lessons as these lessons show your product is in it for the long term. So you can do this by interviewing them or asking them to submit their own stories that you can publish on your website, startup's website. These can be quite challenging to do, especially during this time, but um, it's possible. And through digital technology like social media, you can already reach out to your customers. And then lastly, now that you know how to tell your stories and how your beneficiary can also take advantage of stories, you can now proceed to choosing your platform to tell your stories. So, of course, there's Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, social media. How can you choose which platform best suits your story? So two things. First is to select the best platform to reach your key audience. So where are your audiences located? Where are they hanging out? So if your target audience is the youth or young individuals, where are they mostly? Are they mostly on TikTok or on Instagram? If you're targeting, for example, fisher folks or farmers, do they have social media platforms? um, Especially just coming from a developing country like the Philippines, most farmers and fisher folks do not have access to digital technology. So um, non-government organizations and advocates, innovators, social entrepreneurs reach out to them face to face or through text messages. So maybe their stories are they're more present there instead of social media. Who else? Maybe your target audience are maybe in the older generation. So maybe they're hanging out on Facebook more often instead of, Instagram or TikTok. So you can try to reach them better there. And you can use lots of tools to be able to reach them, right? So that's how important it is to identify or to get to know your audience on a deeper level, um, not just about their needs, but also how they will be able to access information or your product, about your product, rather. All right. So aside from trying to reach your audience where they are, another one is to build getting your stories in the best platform that can deliver your core message. So when I say platform, it's more these things. So is it a podcast or a photo story or two different website articles? So or social media stories. So how are you going to develop your stories um, depends actually also on how you reach your audience and the kind of platform or the design of that platform. So for younger audiences, for example, they tend to consume information in a quicker manner. So they have there are studies that show that younger generations have faster attention spans than any other generation. So they may be able to understand your story through tweets or through photo stories instead. Some millennials listen to podcasts, so maybe your story can be on podcasts instead of writing blogs. So you can also use animated videos for a more general audience to help you discuss your innovation because some innovations may be uh, too technical or too um, nitty gritty about the issues like climate change, especially climate change. It's kind of technical to discuss, especially with all the science behind it. So how are you going to explain to them the gravity of the situation? So you can use animated videos for it and to highlight those stories, and in that way you can also engage both the older and the younger generation in your storytelling. And then, so it all depends to how you can better package your core message and how you can better reach your audience. And oh, I forgot an example. Another example is going back to that sign language example, um, sign language technology that I used previously. So, is it better to tell that story through a blog or through a how-to video, especially if you're going to teach it or teach how your users can use it eventually. So I guess it's better to, well, for me, I guess it's better to use a video because it provides that visual aspect that you're able to see when doing blogs. So, for example, if you're actually, it's not just in innovation. For example, if you're trying to cook something, would you prefer reading it through a recipe book or watching chefs like Gordon Ramsay create your dish? So while it depends on each person, um, sometimes having that visual aspect helps you deliver what you need to do in an easier way. So again, going back to my points earlier, it's important for you to get to know your audience and when developing your innovations. So to sum things all up, stories. I'd like to share with you a quote from Dr. Pamela Rutledge from the Exploring Positive Psychology. So she highlights actually the summary of how powerful stories are. So stories are how we think. They are how we make meaning of life. Stories are how we explain how things work, how we make decisions, how we persuade others, how we understand our place in the world, create identities, define and teach social values. So she basically summed up everything that I said earlier. So that's how powerful stories are, and how this is how you can use stories to better implement your innovation, how you can get more customers to adopt your innovation, and another important thing is how you can get potential partners and investors to support your innovation, because at the end of the day, you'll be needing funding support for your innovation. So you can use stories um, to take your business or innovation to the next level. And just like how Dr. Pamela said, um, you can use these stories to um, connect with these audiences and potential partners, and in that way you can um, better implement or scale your innovation and scale your impact as well. So here are the references from everything that I've shared with you this evening. And thank you so much. If you'd like to connect or learn more about the stories that I write, you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Just search for my name, and I'd be happy to share with you additional stuff. Or if you have any further questions, you can reach out to me through LinkedIn platform. Thank you so much again for Researchathon for having me in this event or in this project. It's really amazing to see young individuals developing their innovation. So I've learned that there are over 500 of you who are developing innovations. So great job for taking this step. Even if you're still young, we know that we can still do it. We can do it. We are creating the future that we want. And so, wishing everyone the best of luck for as you develop your innovations. So, thank you again so much. Turning it over again to Mohammed.
Thank you, Adriel. All right, so we'll open the floor to questions. So if you have any questions, you can post them in the chat or you can unmute yourself. So I did have a question. So how did you become interested in working in development communications?
All right. So, thank you for that question. So, I became interested in development communication because ever since I was in high school, I enjoy writing. Well, actually, not writing, but more on designing materials. So I also do graphic design. So creating posters or layouting publications. So those are the things that I already enjoy when I was still in high school. So when I tried searching or looking for a degree to pursue in college, I looked for the closest thing that is related to it. And although there are other communications courses out there, I thought that which of these courses would I, you know, enjoy the most? And knowing how I do, what do you call this, volunteer work, um, I realized that doing development communication is somehow the fusion of volunteer work and doing communications work. So I pursued development communication, and then when I got already in that course, um, it made me understand it better and actually fell in love with it even more because the course helped me, connect with communities nearby around the university. And you know, um, my university is actually located uh, in a city that's agriculture focused. So a lot of the communities that we've partnered with also experiences agriculture problems in agriculture. So as mentioned earlier, we are experienced by more than 20 typhoons every year. And so they were able to share those experiences affecting their livelihoods. So that inspired me even more to um, use communication to provide solutions or connect solutions to them. So, of course, we have other courses who develops their solutions, and so my role in that is bridging that innovation and the community. So that In that way, I found that I'm making an impact to on their communities. So yeah, that's how I got interested in development communication.
Thank you. And just another question as well. So, what do you think is the most disregarded element to storytelling? Because often some people tend to miss like the purpose or the entire kind of rationale behind writing in the first place. So, what do you think is the most common? I mean, there are of course a lot of limitations and a lot of flaws, right, that people have. And as far as their storytelling is concerned, they might have various like errors or something like that. But what is the most common flaw that you have noticed?
Right. Thank you for that. Based on my observation and actually the stories that my colleagues are sharing with me, the it's weird, but the element that usually this is disregarded is, or actually taking a back seat, is the first part of storytelling, the getting to know your audience part. Because some startups or innovators are so in love with their products and innovations, they tend to highlight immediately what their innovation is all about. Like, what do they want to do? How is their innovation disrupting this industry or this value chain? And so they tend to forget, like, how is this exactly helping my users, and what are they experiencing? I mean, of course, when you develop your innovation, you assume you're solving a problem. So um, you go through that design thinking process when you build empathy. But um, at at the end of at the end of the day, when you develop your innovations, sometimes you miss, um, like I said, nuances in the experiences. And when you do tell your story, sometimes you forget to go back to your audience, and you innovators tend to focus more on the innovation. So trying to uh, trying to understand your audience doesn't stop after you already developed your prototype, right? So it also goes the same with storytelling. So um, starting with your audience in mind, their needs, where they can access the information about your innovation. These are some of the things that you as an innovator also have to keep in mind. And it's quite understandable um, sometimes, because as a startup, there's limited budget, so you don't have enough budget to uh, go back to your communities to check on how their their information needs, or how they will be able to access your information about your innovation more. So we suggest is doing it at the same time. So trying to understand the problem you're solving, the communities you're helping. You can also already ask, what are their needs in terms of information, so that when you develop your innovation, your website or your platforms or anything, you can already integrate those insights in your innovation, so you don't have to go back and forth to the community all the time. You have limited budget. So try to involve the communication or try to involve the communication and the storytelling aspect already at the beginning of your design thinking process, uh, instead of just doing it in the latter part, so that you don't have um, you will not encounter, I guess, going back and forth with your communities. And when you do storytelling, it's not just your audience, it's also being able to communicate it to your investors. And when you can tell your customer story and their experiences to your investors, they'll be hooked even further, aside from the statistics, of course. So yeah, um, get to know your audience, the first thing.
Wonderful. Thank you. All right. If we don't have any other questions, then we can wrap up this session. All right. I think that's everything. All right. So thank you, Adriel, for your time and for your presentation. Oh, wait, we might have a question in the chat. Oh, no, it's just a thank you. All right.
Thank
So
you
thank
too.
you for your time. And of course, right now, this is our final speaker session for the day. So all participants are free to leave and continue working on their research proposals. We do have, of course, more speaker sessions tomorrow and our closing ceremony as well. It's happening tomorrow at 5 p.m. ET. So look forward to seeing all of your submissions and seeing you guys tomorrow.
Thank you.
All right, thank you everyone and take care.